Hi, I am Rose, and you're listening to the Sovereign Soul podcast. I support awakening souls live beyond their ego and limitations so that they can know true freedom. So, today's episode is a complex topic, and I'm going to try my hardest to explain it. I might jump all over the show and I might not be clear. And if this is the case, I do apologize. I would look forward to positive criticism in that you can tell me what isn't clear, or if you have any questions, you can just leave it in the comments. So, yes, the subject is going to be sovereignty and personal responsibility, because these two things are what gives our soul freedom. It frees us from the matrix of earth, beyond this life when we die, and of course in this life, so that we can actually have some kind of mental and emotional freedom and experience a spiritual freedom while we're living in the body. So we are no longer enslaved by our own mind and our own emotions and our triggers, because we are then living beyond the ego. We understand it, and that is what transcending the ego is. You understand it, you know that it's there, but you make a conscious choice in how you're going to behave, as opposed to before knowing you have that conscious choice, you think that you have no choice in how you respond or behave. It's like you're on an autopilot and something or someone else has the remote control over you. Now, in order to get the remote control back into your own hands so that you can have that freedom, you have to understand clearly the point of autonomy over your own self. Because until you really understand that and are willing to take responsibility for that autonomy, chances are you're going to keep going in a loop, and you're never going to quite get that freedom that you perhaps are so craving, or a part of you knows that something bigger and better exists for you. Or when I say bigger and better, I mean like in your consciousness and how you operate, like the emotional prison that you perhaps feel in, or the mental prison you're feeling. You know that there's freedom from that. Freedom will only come when you take back your power over these aspects of yourself. And in other episodes, I've spoken about soul freedom and how important it is to reclaim your soul and to revoke soul contracts from this life and in the spiritual realm. So after we die, from all beings and energies and entities and gods. Because if we are still bound by contract that our soul belongs to someone or something, or I say someone because really human beings have very humanized this God that lives in the sky. But ultimately, if we're still outsourcing our power to that being or that energy or that entity, we are not standing in our own power, and we don't have that autonomy in order to change those patterns and free ourselves from that prison. But somehow personal responsibility feels to be an incredibly difficult thing for people to really grasp, because it's easier to believe that something outside of you has the answers, or someone outside of you can see intense value inside you. Someone else can love you so that you feel lovable. There's a God outside that can redeem you, as opposed to you redeeming yourself. All of these things are looking for a fix outside yourself. And you'll see on the internet people promising transformation in a day, or from one meditation clinic, or one weekend. And it's not true. That is just selling stuff to people's desperation. like desperately looking for that thing. Because after you've had that experience, and you might have a super awesome experience in that one day or weekend seminar, you still have to go back to real life, and you still have to drive your own life, your spaceship, your mental body, your emotional body, your spiritual body, your energetic body, and your physical body. You are the one that's in charge of all those things. When you go back to reality, reality might not hit for a week, it might not hit for a month, but eventually it's going to hit, and you are still the one who is sitting in that life that needs to be lived. So a massive conclusion that I came to very long ago, like at least 10 years now, was realizing the only way that a person can really reclaim our sovereignty is to know that there is nothing outside of us choosing the experiences that we are having. No matter what that experience is, good or bad, it's the ego that really wants to decide whether something is good or bad, stuck in that like deep duality. You crave one thing, you resist another thing. And fact of the matter, nothing's actually good or bad. It's really our perception of that thing in our life, whether it's going to make us suffer or whether we are going to move through that thing. So I can see that before we come into this human body, we have had to choose everything that we are experiencing if sovereignty, true sovereignty, is actually a thing. So that is pure autonomy over our being before we got here. So I would call those kind of things unconscious choice, because when we die and when we are reborn, we have spiritual amnesia, which in itself is not a great sign that things are healthy, because we have a right to remember everything. And if, for example, you forget the abuses and the toxicity and the disrespect, and you come in with this pure hopefulness, perhaps, that is again taking advantage of innocence. And that's not allowing us to make full decisions for our own existence. And I'm talking about this when, before we come back into the body, we have to be able to know that somewhere we've made conscious choice. When we were on the other side, we were conscious. But as soon as we come into the body, it becomes unconscious, because then we have forgotten. We have the spiritual amnesia and this massive separation. And in that amnesia and that massive separation, we come back into this body, and life feels like it is just happening to us. It's like we've been thrown in a washing machine and we just being pushed in every direction. Of course, it does depend on the person's life. I can say for me, it felt like I was in a washing machine. And that only really changed for me when I was 38 or 39 years old. But up until then, it was crazy trying to find my feet and trying to get an ounce of, I say, control back in my life, but it really felt like to be in my power, to know who I am, and then to be able to drive this vehicle from a place of conscious choice rather than that unconscious space. Because when we're not taught properly in the body, taking responsibility for ourselves is really difficult, because, like I say, we're always looking for something outside. The whole world is not set up to tell us that we need to be responsible. There are tons of personal development things out there which do speak about it now, but I'm not sure if it's also spoken about from the perspective of in the spiritual realm. Because if we believe that life just randomly happened to us, this life, all the things that are happening, the people in it, and it's just random, there's something outside there who's pulling the strings, well, then that's exactly what life is going to be for you. But if you believe that you are where you are because you've chosen to be where you are, that is the first massively powerful step in stepping back into your power. To go, okay, well, I chose this. Might not make sense, and I'm not trying to make sense of it in my ego. That's what you have to tell yourself, because the ego will tell you all sorts of shit, because it is constantly fighting for its survival. And its survival is one of enormous separation and enormous resistance. So taking on that responsibility, because that's really what it is. It's all of a sudden saying, okay, well, God didn't make this choice for me. I made this choice for me. And I would honestly say a loving God would actually let us make those choices, as opposed to thinking it needs to make choices for us. So if you can imagine that you are a part of the ultimate creation, and I'm not talking about the God and the gods and the deities and the entities and the angels and all these hierarchies that sit on the earth plane. I'm talking about beyond that, the thing that is everything, the source of it all. Like, we are all a part of that. And even that mess around Earth is actually a part of that. It's just extremely detached. So when we're in that energy gridlock around the Earth, we too are extremely detached. And in order to become reattached to the whole, that whole wants us to have the experiences that we want to have. It doesn't control anything. There is nothing controlled about it. So the mind plays its own game where we are controlled by ourselves. We are controlled by our emotions. We are controlled by our thoughts. We're controlled by all of these things, which are then totally socially conditioned, which are actually so far from our authentic self. And when we believe in all those things, we give them more and more strength. And whether those social conditioning things are to do with giving our power away to something, a political system, a medical system, and then a religious system, and a family system, an educational system, we give our power to those things when we believe it has more say and more answers to us than what we do. So real autonomy, real sovereignty is actually knowing yourself as being a free being that chose to come into this life, to have all the experiences you're having, and also that those experiences are only leading you to good places, because that is another way that you are overriding the ego and you're changing your view to understand that you actually are in an alignment with something much bigger, and that you can take yourself out of the chaos and the disempowerment to put yourself back into a space of empowerment. But you have to be willing to claim your entire story, that it's yours, that you wrote it, that there wasn't something out there writing it for you, because then you actually have autonomy over yourself. And then you can consciously start making choices when you start realizing the difference between a conscious choice and an unconscious choice. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I hope that made sense. And like I say, if anything didn't make sense or wasn't clear, please leave a comment. I also have tons of free resources. So if anybody's looking for extra reading material or audios or all sorts of, I don't know, anything that can help you to expand your own consciousness, I am always willing to share. So please feel free to reach out. Okay, I will see you in the next one.